In 1993, a small studio named id Software made a first-person shooter called Doom that forever changed gaming. And tonight, it is back with a new Doom.
It's hard to believe this was almost 10 years ago.
We've been inspired by the way those original Doom games made us feel when we played them.
I remember watching this live in my studio apartment in the middle of Los Angeles, a Doom level in and of itself, and mostly rolling my eyes. I've heard plenty of hollow E3 hype speeches, and frankly, id Software was past its prime. The original Doom was lightning in a bottle, and there was no way you could capture it again. And let me tell ya, never have I been so happy to be utterly, completely, ridiculously wrong.
Rip and tear until it is done.
Doom 2016 is unabashedly, unflinchingly, unapologetically Doom. It's fast. It's loud, over the top, and violent. Very violent. It has secrets. It has keycards. And it's a little scary. It has mobs of bloodthirsty demons, satanic imagery, and guns. Big f***ing guns. And it looks insane. The characteristics of Doom are as familiar to gamers as falling Tetris blocks and Mario hops. Its gameplay forever embedded into the fabric of the gaming medium. And in recent years, gamers have enjoyed Doom at its full doominess, whether it be with new entries, fresh takes on old ones, modified takes from hardcore fans, as well as a slew of its acolytes and competitors re-embracing the Doom template and pushing it forward. However, it wasn't that long ago when the run-and-gun stylings Doom popularized were seen as a thing of the past. And it also wasn't that long ago when Doom being Doom was a refreshing surprise. Now, while this video serves as somewhat a review, somewhat a retrospective, in truth, it's a celebration of this game. My celebration of this game. Because Doom 2016 is an important title for me, a landmark experience in my gaming life. A title that broadened my horizons on the medium while also reaffirming why I love it in the first place. And more so, why I love the first-person shooter genre. And so, on the cusp of a new Doom game dropping, The Dark Ages, I will be taking you on a journey through the aspects of Doom 2016 that I and many others love the most. All meant to serve as a reminder as to why this game hit so hard for me and the larger Doom fanbase. And so, to understand why Doom 2016 made such an impact, one has to be aware of the context of when it came out, the state of the FPS genre at the time, and the state of its developer, id Software. While id Software didn't invent the first-person shooter, they had defined the template for it during the 1990s, with the release of Wolfenstein 3D, the original Doom, as well as Quake. Fresh, inventive, and pioneering titles that delighted gamers with their fast, over-the-top arcade gameplay, immersive graphics, and addictive multiplayer. Their success would lead to a legion of competitors copying and innovating on id's groundwork, creating the classic first-person shooter era many of us still enjoy. The late 90s and early 2000s, however, saw the rise of what I like to call the adventure shooter. Titles that drew from id's FPS style, but focused more on narrative and immersion, expanding the popularity of the genre. Valve's Half-Life series was the poster child for this style of shooter, but I'd argue id's own Quake 2 helped kick it off with its large interconnected levels. Then came the rise of Halo and Call of Duty. Building on the adventure shooters of the day, these were more conservative gameplay experiences, geared towards quote-unquote realism, limiting a player's movement, arsenal, and pushing them to be more defensive and take cover, with plenty of scripted sequences to dazzle them. The franchises they would spawn would earn their developers billions, and soon the mainstream FPS genre was dominated by titles either copying them or building off their style. And for me and other FPS fans of the time, it was hard not to get a sense that the old school run-and-gun FPS stylings of the 90s were an obsolete relic of the past. And this particular time period was an awkward one for id Software. I wouldn't say it was a dark time, far from it. They were still keeping the company coffers full, their titles all had vibrant communities in both the modding and multiplayer scenes, and they were still pushing graphics technology forward, as well as innovating in the mobile space, lest we forget. Doom RPG slaps, by the way. But the fact of the matter was, their games, both developed and produced, were not making the same impact as their 90s efforts. Doom 3 would drop in 2004, and while it was a significant critical and commercial success, its lean into slow-burn survival horror, as well as the narrative stylings popularized by titles like Half-Life and System Shock, polarized its fanbase, with its detractors feeling it strayed too far from what made the original Doom titles so great. In 2011, id would follow up Doom 3 with their first new IP in 15 years, Rage, a post-apocalyptic shooter that would build on the mechanics of Doom 3 and place players in large open environments with vehicles. While it was successful, it would disappoint many with its short, anticlimactic story and lack of gameplay innovation, being far from the earth-shatterer id was hoping for. The true low point would come with the troubled development of Doom 4. Originally greenlit in 2007, Doom 4 would be a reimagining of Doom 2 Hell on Earth, much like how Doom 3 was a reimagining of the original. However, the original plan for Doom 4 would see it stray even further from the classic formula, as it was envisioned to be a Call of Duty style experience, embracing the popular shooter trends of the day. It would feature all the staples of Call of Duty gameplay, a regenerative health system, an emphasis on defense by using cover, as well as scripted events, earning it the nickname Call of Doom within the id offices. For anyone who wants more information on this era of id, as well as the development of Doom 4, it is beautifully told in depth in the no-clip documentary Doom Resurrected. The link is down in the description. To me, everything about Doom 4's development is symbolic of where id Software was creatively at the time. In terms of their game design, they had spent the last decade not innovating, but rather chasing the trends of their FPS competition. Now look, I'm not saying Doom 3 and Rage are terrible games. No, I like them, they both have their merits. But let's be real, they do not compare to id's 90s efforts, and I think we can all agree that Doom turning into a Call of Duty clone is just... no. Long story short, Doom 4 wasn't coming together. The id team had a come-to-Jesus moment and realized it simply didn't feel like Doom, and that was a huge problem. And thus, Doom 4 was scrapped in favor of a new version that would draw inspiration from the original titles. Now, some of this is my own take on it, but I think the epiphany these guys had is that the classic run-and-gun style of Doom was id's style. They invented this gameplay, and who was to say it couldn't be brought back? Who's to say it couldn't be built on? Why did they have to chase what other developers were doing when there was a time when those developers were chasing them? And so, they went back to basics. They pinpointed what made their classic title so great and went from there. And the result was one hell of a game. Surviving Doom's combat requires pure offense. The term, the best offense is a good defense, is thoroughly rejected here. Rejected, stomped on, and pissed on, to put it crudely. Players will have to be constantly moving with as little interruption to their fire as possible. Standing in place is guaranteed to get you snuck up on and killed. But how? How do you get players to focus on pure offensive play when, more often than not, their instincts will push them to run away and get cover? It's simple. You incentivize them. And the first of these incentives? The glory kill. Glory kills work like this. When an enemy is damaged enough, they will enter a stagger state, strobing like an early morning warehouse rave. And when the player is close enough, they can hit a single button or key and, well, rip and tear the enemy apart. On paper, the glory kill system is far from anything new. It's essentially a QuickTime event which most seasoned gamers are familiar with. In fact, when Doom 2016 was first previewed, I couldn't help but cringe at it. By this time, QuickTime events were becoming a tiresome cliche of action games, and for me, it seemed like id following another trend. But playing 2016 for the first time, I quickly realized this mechanic was not just a flashy gimmick, but central to the combat loop, as glory kills always reward health. And a little bit of ammo too, but mostly health. And if the player finds themselves in a critical state, while their instincts will tell them to run off and find a health pickup, the smarter choice is to keep fighting for the glory kill. And if they can do so, the reward is immense. Can glory kills get a bit stale and tedious? Yes. In fact, that was one of my chief concerns of them in my first playthrough. But this is mitigated by the fact that the animations are very fast, on average only lasting a few seconds, which is crucial to keep the flow of combat going, and they are different depending on which angle you approach. In fact, there are in-game challenges that push players to get all instances of the glory kill. id took a tired mechanic and breathed new life into it, and in a subtle way, or maybe unsubtle way, taught players how to be efficiently aggressive in FPS combat. The second incentive is the chainsaw. The chainsaw is all around one of my favorite improvements to the Doom formula in 2016. A staple of all Doom games. In the classic titles, the chainsaw, while fun, was seldom the smart choice, and really best in moments of desperation, or if the player really needed to save their ammo. That's still true here to a degree, but its value in combat has been significantly broadened. Mechanically, it's now a one-shot kill as opposed to the gradual shaving off of health as in the originals, playing out in an animation not all that different from the glory kill. Ew, look at his organs! To balance it out, the chainsaw now requires fuel that can be collected throughout levels. Low-level enemies like soldiers and imps can be taken out with only a single tick of fuel. Mid-level demons like the Hell Knights require 3 ticks, and high-level demons like Mankeybine and Barons need 5. A full tank, if you will. However, one-shotting enemies is not the true value of the chainsaw. Hell no. The real perk of it is that it always grants you ammo. A literal geyser of it. Much like the dynamic of glory kills with health, if the player finds themselves low on ammo, sure, they could risk hunting down pickups, or they can stay in the fight by selectively chainsawing, with each battle posing the question, does it make sense to save all of my fuel for the tough high-level demons, or should I use the single ticks on the smaller ones to keep the ammo plentiful? As long as it keeps the player in the fight, there's no wrong answer. The beauty of these two mechanics is that they give players some agency over their health and ammo, adding a new layer of resource management and strategy, challenging them to think on the fly while also acting on instinct. And when they get the hang of it, they'll find themselves in a satisfying flow state of combat that serves to make them feel like a powerful badass. Of course, this resource management combat was expanded on in Doom Eternal, and is the ultimate form of it. So far. But it's still fascinating and inspiring to see the seeds of it planted here. Now, there is another key element to Doom 2016's combat that wasn't necessarily advertised by id at the time, but has grown to be a central mechanic for this new generation of Doom, especially with the release of Eternal. To some, it's a revelation, to others, it's controversial. And that, ladies and gents, is the quick swap. Doom does not have reloading. However, much of its powerful arsenal has a pause for a reload animation or cooldown. The Super Shotgun, for example, has classically featured a good beat of reload, balancing out its sheer destructiveness. However, here if you shoot the super shoddy, then immediately swap to another weapon, and then immediately swap back, you'll notice the reload animation is cancelled, allowing you to fire the super shoddy as soon as you swap back to it. So if you have the nimble fingers for it, as well as a particular upgrade that lets you quick swap faster, you are able to forego weapon cooldowns and maximize your damage per second, allowing the toughest of demons to be taken down quickly and efficiently, conserving your ammo to a degree and better preserving the rapid flow of combat the overall game design pushes you to have. The beauty of this is that with Doom 2016's varied arsenal, each with multiple alternate fires that can be swapped on the fly as well, players have the freedom to come up with their own quick swap combos and make them as complex as they can handle. My favorite sort of combo is one I like to call the pepper punch, where I whittle down an enemy's health with a peppering of rapid fire bullets, and then quick swap to a heavy hitter like the super shotgun or Gauss cannon to give them the final death punch. I'm also quite fond of going between the rockets and Gauss as well. Although I am far from a master at this technique, as I'm sure some of my viewers will point out, but it's not hard to find other more skillful Doom content creators who have insane combos and reflexes, sometimes swapping half the arsenal in the blink of an eye. Doom 2016 was not the first shooter where quick swap combos like this were possible, but it might be the first where it was encouraged by the developer, once again evidenced by the fact that there are upgrades to support it. The obvious criticism of it is that it makes the player too powerful and cheats the game. And yeah, it kinda does. Although in 2016, the quick swap is more of an optional advanced technique meant for players to uncover, and isn't really needed to beat the game, although that is debatable for the Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare difficulties. In Doom Eternal, however, I would say the quick swap is central to succeeding in that game, and the player is explicitly told to use it with much of its combat system designed around it. But regardless of whether it gives the player too much power, at the end of the day, the quick swap is just plain satisfying and fun. Frankly, it makes you feel awesome, like a precise samurai or Ash after a boomstick massacre. And ultimately, that's what every Doom game strives to do, make you feel awesome. The last thing to touch on with 2016's gameplay that I find fascinating from a historical and symbolic perspective is that while it takes inspiration from and builds off the classic Doom titles, in truth, it's actually largely an iteration on another of id Software's franchises, Quake. Frankly, 2016 is way more Quake than Doom. For starters, Quake was one of the pioneers of movement within a full 3D space, setting the standards for jumping and platforming in the FPS genre. Before source ports like GZ Doom allowed it, there was no jumping in the classic Doom games, outside of advanced tricks. And while Doom 3 did feature jumping and platforming, it was far from the bunny hops and soaring of Quake. So, to put it simply, id took Quake movement and brought it to Doom. And thus, in 2016, not only do you have platforming sections littered throughout each mission, with mantling added for better flow, you also have jump pads that let you soar through the air, with earned abilities that let you have further air control. And as you can see by my gameplay footage, it was hard for me to keep that thumb off the spacebar. It all feels amazing too, the type of movement and control you don't think about because you don't have to. The responsiveness and speed of it allows it to become muscle memory quickly. One of the more explicit similarities is that Doom 2016 features Quake power-ups. Sure, there are Doom staples like Invulnerability and Berserk, which allows you to rip and tear enemies apart with your bare hands. Making puddles, making demon puddles. But Quake's quad damage is prominently featured, quadrupling your damage as advertised. But of course, the biggest example is the level design. Doom 2016's missions faithfully follow the quote-unquote level design playbook scribed by id's founders. Most levels have looping design to cut down on backtracking, there are hints to hidden areas with clear rewards to entice the player to explore, not to mention plenty of long corridors for focus shooting and projectile dodging. And eagle-eyed doomers might catch some classic design borrowed from the old games. Speaking of classic design, much like the classic Dooms and Quakes, level progression largely happens from collecting keycards to unlock doors, with them harkening back to the old chip design. There's also the return of key skulls in the Hell levels. But for those who find the old keycard mechanic tiresome, fret not. The game does a good job creating unique circumstances to earn these keys, and does throw in some other objectives to mix things up. But a major characteristic of these new maps is that they are broken up by large, multi-tiered arenas, designed very much in the vein of Quake multiplayer deathmatch maps. Absolutely, the original Doom games had arena design in their maps that were enjoyed in their multiplayer modes, but these spaces look like they were ripped straight out of Quake 3, and its Unreal competitors. From the jump pads to the teleporters, spiraling ramps, and vertical vantage points. And like everything else in Doom 2016's gameplay, it's all meant to keep the player constantly moving and fighting. Nothing but speed, nothing but flow, making the largest combat encounters an adrenaline-inducing roller coaster splatfest. To me, everything about this design is symbolic of id not only reclaiming the FPS style they developed, but also pushing it forward. This is speculation on my part, but I think a big reason why we haven't seen id, or one of its companion developers, put out a new single-player Quake game is because there wouldn't be much that differentiates it gameplay-wise from Doom 2016. That being said, I'm pretty confident we're gonna get a new single-player Quake in the coming years, and more than likely it's gonna come from Machine Games, evidenced by the new campaigns they developed for the Quake 1 and 2 remasters, and by the fact that they themselves have said they want to make a new Quake. Granted, the success of their Indiana Jones game, which is amazing by the way, might have them focusing on sequels to that. But if I was a betting man, Machine Games is gonna make more Quake. So far, we've delved into the gameplay legacy of Doom and id Software, but another legacy of importance is, of course, the technical. id Software has always been on the forefront of gaming tech, with each of their games being a significant step forward, sometimes a leap, in graphical presentation, and the key figure behind much of it is everyone's favorite programming messiah, John Carmack. However, Carmack would depart the company he helped found in 2013 to work full-time at Oculus, and for the first time in the company's history, id's newest game engine would not be developed by him, although reportedly he did put in some early work on it. And following the man who essentially defined what a first-person game engine should be was a tall order. So id hired one Tiago Souza, and I am so sorry if I just butchered that. And Tiago Souza's previous work experience was lead R&D graphics engineer at Crytek for the Cry engine. Yeah, that's precisely who you hire for this type of job. Souza's work, along with technical director Robert Duffy and the rest of the talented id team, would result in the magnificent id Tech 6. And the games it would produce would not only be visual stunners, dripping with all the shiny technical niceties of state-of-the-art gaming, but would run buttery smooth on a variety of different hardware setups. Everything from god-tier PCs to the Nintendo Switch, which I still think is bonkers. Shout out to Panic Button. Almost 10 years on, Doom 2016 still looks stunning. I mean, one of the funnest aspects of capturing gameplay footage for this was turning off the HUD and just staring at the beautiful, or rather beautifully horrifying vistas of this game. Two things that always stick out to me are the bits of light reflecting off your guns, as well as smoke effects mixed with dynamic lighting and shadows, instantly creating a sense of gloomy, creepy atmosphere. And you gotta love those little ember particles floating around. Phenomenal. Seriously, every inch of this game still looks incredible, except for, I don't know, these like fan things? Like, what are these even venting? They don't lead anywhere. And where's the light source for that beige background? Ugh, just bad. Do better, id. Jokes aside, while I can gush on the technical niceties, it's Doom 2016's superb art direction that really makes this engine purr. 2016's art direction draws from all Doom games before it, but to be specific, I would say it's a synthesis of the aesthetics of the classic games with Doom 3. The UAC facility, for example, feels in line with how it was depicted in Doom 3. Sleek space-age futurism with heavy, steamy mechanical industry. A melding of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek and the Nostromo from Alien. A major difference from Doom 3, though, that harkens to the classic titles is that it's colorful. In fact, when comparing the two games, Doom 3 looks borderline monochromatic, which of course fit its horror focus, but the palette here is just more attractive. It's even more dramatic when contrasted with Rage, which despite its post-apocalyptic setting and some truly inspired art direction, had a washed-out brown look which was an irksome characteristic of shooters of this era. In 2016, you get vibrant reds and oranges, neutral hues contrasted with striking yellows, neon hues of blue and purple, and plenty of green to help guide players through levels, but also creating more of a supernatural feel. It's alive and energetic, while still creating a sense of danger and horror as well. The real meat of Doom's aesthetics, DOOMsthetics, is the contrasting of high sci-fi with dark medieval satanic. Artificial sleek against organics, viscera, and stone. A peculiar mixture that has personified this franchise. All Doom games do a wonderful job of this, Doom 3 in particular, and personally I think Eternal did it best. But Doom 2016 set the new standard. Through the halls of the UAC, you'll see hell encroaching. Bulbous, bloody mounds of flesh oozing through shiny steel, and plenty of pentagrams and skeletons. But it's when we travel into hell itself that we see 2016's most captivating and jaw-dropping visuals. In many ways, 2016's hell draws from Doom 3's depiction of it, feeling like a grim medieval torture dungeon that the likes of Pinhead would feel comfortable in. The halls and canyons of hell are a cursed, ruined place of rusted steel and bone, packed full of intricate detail. Every time I play through Doom 2016, I'm always catching new stuff I missed before. And while I think Doom 3's hell served as a foundation, much of it harkens to the hell aesthetics of Doom 1 and 2. Longtime Doomers will see the return of classic murals and poor tortured souls strewn on the walls, oceans of lava as well as pools of green toxic waste, not to mention the winks and nods to things that came before, and will come after. To me, it's a more tangible take on what the original id team was going for back in the day.
At unsafe levels.
But the biggest example of what I'm talking about is the designs of the demons themselves, the real stars of Doom.
Demonic presence at unsafe levels.
I love the demon designs of Doom 3. They were a more realistic in big quotes there, take on the classic demons, making them feel more horrific and animalistic. Those qualities are still here, but in 2016, I feel like id geared many of their monster designs to return to the more cartoonish personalities of Doom 1 and 2. The Cacodemon, for instance, returns to its iconic design, bringing back its more humorous qualities. The Pinky Demon is another one, going back to its bulldogish appearance, huffing and puffing as it tries to trample you. Lost Souls return to being screaming, flaming skulls and are just as annoying as ever. The Bankybus is back to feeling like the big, dumb, bulbous, disgusting tank of the old games, feeling like a big old troll. And the Barons of Hell are once again big, pink, and horny. Literally. But interestingly enough, Hell Knights look almost identical to their Doom 3 depiction, which I don't mind at all. It's a great design, and there's a reason they put it on the Doom 3 cover. Some of the newer demon designs don't hit quite as good as the classics. The possessed soldiers, while creepy and disgusting with their body armor melding into their skin, aren't nearly as memorable as the classic green-haired soldiers. And Summoners, a new, less intense version of the Archvile, has a striking design that reminds me somewhat of the newer take of the Cenobites in the Hellraiser reboot, but don't really have the personality of its inspiration and other demon counterparts. And the Cyber Demon, while a fantastic design with lots of character, doesn't carry the same sense of intimidation as the classic incarnation. The Spider Mastermind they nailed though. Once again, a wicked looking hunk of brain matter updated with more sleek mechanical legs, the type of demon begging to be ended. Putting the soldiers and summoners aside though, these are easily some of my favorite demon designs in the series next to Eternal, and of course the original. And what makes them work is the fact that id didn't design them as things to just kill, but rather characters with distinct personalities that are likable in their own horrible way. And they need to be if the player is going to spend the next 10 plus hours ripping them apart over and over and over and over and over. Oh, but we can't conclude talking about 2016's presentation without touching on one of its defining aspects, Mick Gordon's epic soundtrack. Doom 2016's soundscape is the very definition of demon-killing music, a sinful symphony of raging bass guitars, distorted synths, and chainsaws. No, for real, he sampled chainsaws for the soundtrack. It's the sonic personification of the Doomslayer himself, controlled, concentrated rage that scores the action perfectly. Every piece of Gordon's music is noteworthy, but his track, the BFG Division, which you all enjoyed in this video's intro, has gone on to become equally, if not more iconic than the music of the original's E1M1. And like many aspects of this game, it's a melding with the new and old, as longtime Doomers will catch subtle samples to the classic Bobby Prince music, and by extension, the prominent metal bands of the time he ripped off. Sadly, Gordon's legendary partnership with id ended after the release of Eternal, with an unfortunate falling out. However, his mark on the series will be everlasting, setting the standard by which all future composers will have to meet. The last thing I'll talk about with 2016 is an aspect that has grown more important through subsequent Doom releases: the narrative. While the original Doom was envisioned to be a more story-driven experience, ultimately the narrative took a back seat to its gameplay, featuring a thin setup to justify the carnage. The armies of hell have invaded Mars, and you are the one-man army that has to stop it. It was a goofy and very video gamey setup that has since become iconic and is often copied, and I would argue this plot was central to Doom's charm. Doom 3, which to remind was a reimagining of the first game, took a crack at a more fleshed out narrative, keeping the original plot but adding more characters, world building, and dramatic stakes, trading in the goofier aspects of the classic titles for more grim, horror tropes and atmosphere. I certainly enjoyed it, but Doom 3's detractors would argue the steady stream of text and audio logs needlessly slowed down the experience.
You must understand, our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind.
As with many aspects of Doom 2016, it would go back to the narrative tone and stylings of the original. A goofy, blood-stained, satanic plot that if visualized would fit perfectly on a death metal album cover. And you would be forgiven in thinking it was another remake, seeing as it follows more or less the same plot as the original and Doom 3. Demons invade Mars, you're the only Marine left to stop it, you travel to Hell, you fight Twin Barons, you fight the Cyber Demon, and just as in Doom 3, the Hell invasion is triggered by a mad, corrupted scientist who eventually becomes a powerful demon. In that game, it was Dr. Petruger. In 2016, it's Olivia Pierce, who becomes the Spider Mastermind, once again serving as the final boss. However, if players dig deeper and play through Doom Eternal, which confirms it, they'll discover this is not a remake, but in fact a direct sequel to the classic games, specifically Doom 64. And this Marine is actually the same one who beat back Hell's forces before, now transformed into a godlike warrior known as the Doomslayer. And this aspect, along with the bounty of lore that would accompany it, would add a whole new layer for the hardcore Doom fans to sink their teeth into, which is quite the turn of events, seeing as narrative was not really valued in this franchise. Now, I don't want to imply that fans didn't care about Doom lore in the classic games, but one only has to do a quick YouTube search to see the wide range of videos covering Doom 2016's surprisingly deep lore, with plenty of speculation and debating in their comments. And to me, what makes this new narrative layer work is not that it attempts to elevate the source material like Doom 3 did, but rather embraces its heavy metal fire and brimstone video gamey silliness and runs with it. Doom be Doom, and that certainly applies to the story.
We will have to make even greater sacrifices.
This isn't progress, it's madness.
Funnily enough, the way id approached the narrative was in line with Half-Life and similar narrative-driven shooters, in that they kept the story indirect and mostly optional. The reason for this was to get players immediately into the action and not waste the time of anyone who didn't care about the story. A choice I'm all about, as I feel indirect experiential storytelling is often at its best in FPSs. There are scant few cutscenes in 2016, and they're typically from the eyes of the Slayer, never breaking immersion, and more explicit story moments are largely expressed through holograms that magically pop up throughout the adventure, which is a hair contrived, but the actual scenes are well done, the performances are solid, and some do carry emotional weight with them. One hologram that always sticks out to me depicts Samuel Hayden, the cybernetic head of this Mars facility who helps you throughout the adventure, finding the Slayer's sarcophagus in hell and resting a hand on it. A scene that, after completing Doom Eternal, holds more meaning for me.
I am the head of this corporation. All your work and discoveries here belong to me. He was mine before you even found him.
The next story device is the most substantial, the lore. There isn't anything special about how the lore is conveyed. You collect data pads throughout the adventure, which are cataloged in a codex, familiar to anyone who has ever played, I don't know, a BioWare game, or hell, even Doom 3. But the lore is immense and fascinating, detailing the history of every area you visit, the backstory of every character you meet, okay, all three of them, but still, as well as your weapons and, of course, the demons. Truly, at the time, it was surprising to see a Doom game go this hard on its lore, at least for me. It's the sort of thing you would expect from an epic RPG, tabletop or otherwise. And whether or not you decide to read through all of it yourself or listen to a YouTuber recount it all, you're gonna have a good time, and if you're like me, have some giggles at how absurd it is. Anyone who's a Warhammer 40k fan will feel right at home.
We take pride in nurturing a growing workforce, and each year we harvest only the best of the best. Are you ready to move up? To take...
In the first age, in the first battle, when the shadows first lengthened, one stood, burned by the embers of Armageddon.
The most substantial bits of lore are found in Hell, being the Slayer Testaments, a mythological recounting of the Slayer's history read by a demon that sounds an awful lot like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget.
None could stand before the Horde but the Doomslayer.
Excellent. This plan will put all the gold in the country in my hands.
Man, I missed that show. While we didn't know it at the time, these were actually setting up the events of the upcoming Dark Ages, as, according to id, the events of that game will lead up to the Slayer Testaments, which I think is pretty dang cool. But I think the most crucial thing about 2016's narrative is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. I know I'm starting to beat a dead pinky demon here, but once again, Doom 3 was acutely focused on horror. Grim, disturbing, pants-wetting horror, with very little levity. Of course, the old Doom games had tons of horror elements and were scary in their own right, but Doom 3 gave people nightmares and still gives people nightmares. To this day, it's considered one of the scariest games ever made. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that was a great take on Doom, and I wouldn't be shocked if id returned to that sort of tone someday. But the thing is, the classic Dooms had an air of humor to them due to their over-the-top stylings. I mean, the first game ends with a cute bunny's head on a spike. That's the twisted humor of Doom. It's as if it was made by a bunch of caffeinated 20-somethings obsessed with heavy metal and action movies. Because it was. These guys just threw in anything they felt was awesome, funny, scary, or made them throw up the devil horns. Sure, it made Doom somewhat of a hodgepodge, but it gave it a personality that helped make it iconic, and I feel like that's reflected in the recent boomer shooters that take influence from it. They are silly in the way that Doom was. And Duke Nukem too, calm down. And that personality is brought back in 2016. Once again, the whole game is like a heavy metal album cover. Absurd, extreme, and violent in a way that borders on cartoonish. And there is levity throughout. I mean, the main secret collectible are little Doomslayer action figures, and you can find Commander Keen's head on a stick, much like finding him hanging in Doom 2. And some of the glory kills, while disgusting, have an air of humor to them. Not to mention the pop culture references. Every time I played 2016, I always jump into a pool of lava just so I can see the Slayer throw up the Terminator 2 thumb before he dies. The obvious parallel is with one of Doom's key influences, The Evil Dead, which balanced horror and splat-stick silliness. But I also think the tone of Doom 2016 is akin to something like Metalocalypse. The humor is in how over-the-top and extreme everything is, to the point where it is poking fun at it, but also respecting and fully leaning into the material. And yeah, personally, I think Doom is at its best when it's a little goofy. I like the levity, I like the absurdity, I like the over-the-top nature and the winks and nods to pop culture. It's the spirit that the original id team brought to the early games, and I think the new id team has carried that goofy torch well. And I think the keenest example of all that I'm talking about is the Doomslayer himself. The Doomslayer is not a quote-unquote funny character, but my god does he make me laugh. His depiction in Doom 2016 is of an unflinching, unstoppable ball of seething anger and hatred. While he never utters a single word, he carries himself in a way as if he's saying, "Great, I have to deal with this shit again." His sheer meanness is reflected in everything he does, as he interacts with the world strictly through violence, and it cracks me up. When he receives a voice message he doesn't like, he shoves the screen away, or just punches it. When he finds a combat bot with an upgrade, he doesn't take it, he punches it away. When he finds an upgrade in a glass ball, he smashes it in his hand. While he is trying to save humanity, he has zero sentimentality or care for the dead, as he has no qualms using them to progress.
Access granted. Hello, Dr. Peter.
And I do find it funny that he's introduced in this game ass naked and smashing in zombie skulls. The only time there's a hint of positivity in him is when he finds a new weapon, examining it as if he's thinking, huh, that's pretty neat. Of course, the funniest moment is when he has to shut down the Argent Tower, with Samuel Hayden instructing him on how to do it carefully. At first, it seems like the Slayer is listening to him.
Warning. Energy contamination detected.
Destroying the production of Argent energy isn't necessary.
The Doomslayer is as if you took the smashiness of the Hulk and mixed it with the determination of John Wick. He simply doesn't care about anything other than fighting demons and getting revenge for his pet rabbit. Seriously. He might be the most expressive incarnation of the Doom Marine, next to when the classic portrait smiles. Expressive in all the anger ways. To me, he embodies the entire attitude of Doom 2016 and its successors, and is a character I find pure joy in inhabiting. Doom 2016 is a landmark game not only in the Doom franchise, but in first-person shooters, period. Is it as groundbreaking as the original or as innovative as some of its peers? No. However, it brought classic run-and-gun back to the mainstream, and found a way to make it feel fresh and inventive again, and by extension, it reasserted id Software as an industry leader. To me, it's one of many games that proves the point that just because a style of game is old or has been dormant for a long time doesn't mean it doesn't have a place in gaming and can't be innovated on. Doom 2016 can't take full credit for this, but I don't think it's totally a coincidence that following its release, we enjoyed the wave of boomer shooters that hit the indie market. And even in the AAA space, we've seen first-person shooters step away from the Call of Duty and Halo likes that dominated the market for so many years. For me personally, Doom 2016 is one of my favorite shooters of all time. I like all the Doom games, but this is an experience that I find to be nearly perfect. One of those games I always have a great time coming back to. I think it's one of the most well-rounded and approachable games in the franchise. When someone asks me what's a great title to enter this series, it's always my first recommendation next to the original. But going a bit deeper, it reignited my love for a genre I adored in my youth. and helped bring a style of shooter back that I truly thought was gone. Doom 2016 inspired me to start exploring the genre again, got me fascinated with its history again, made me seek out more titles like it in the indie scene, like my beloved Dusk, and ultimately gave me the itch to start talking about it on the YouTube platform. Indeed, without Doom 2016, this channel likely wouldn't exist. And soon I will be delving into its prequel, The Dark Ages. I haven't played it yet, although the early response seems glowing. I have no idea how I will react to it. I know it's going to be very different, but the fact that 2016 enabled id to press on with this franchise and take it into new, exciting directions makes me love it even more. This was my love letter to Doom 2016. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to share your thoughts on Doom 2016 in the comments below, and if you're curious about my other Doom content, it's all linked in the description. Rip and tear, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and smack that bell. If you want to come say hi, my Discord is linked below, along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.